Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
Hello and a very warm welcome to Never Mind the Dambusters, the podcast that goes beyond aircraft and operations to explore the people, decisions and consequences behind the air war, the Second World War. I'm Jane Gulliford-Lowes and it's wonderful to have you with us once again. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined again by my co-host James Jefferies. James, great to have you alongside me. What have you been reading or thinking about lately and what have you been up to?
Well, the main thing is we're recording this mid-January. This goes out in February, I think, doesn't it? I will have less than a year to submit my PhD thesis. So that is very much on my mind. That's crept up. That really has crept up. I've also got an assignment I'm working on at the moment. Done a little bit of reading. I've been actually taking a bit of a break from the Second World War, just sort of like over Christmas into New Year and, reading articles and writing all day. And so I read a very good book on the French Revolution and Ben Elton's autobiography. It was very interesting. And actually last year I managed to read 53 books in the year, which is quite achievable. I need to go out more, really.
Is that actual books or?
That's me,
Yeah, is it actual physical books or audio books or a combination?
Physical books, and some are about 100 pages. Some are like the Osprey books, but a lot of them are 300-400 pages. There was an 800-page book, so it's quite a mixture. And but in the I definitely want to get. I know, and that's on top of articles for the PhD and research and stuff. And it's just mad, absolutely mad. But I do plan to reread The Flyer and Pip Beck's book very, very soon.
Lovely
for the PhD and research and such. Like Flyer is just like, if you haven't read it, listeners, read it. Fantastic book. And I've got Roland. Oh, yeah. And I've got Roland White's book on the mosquito, which I have been delaying for a while to read, and I've heard very, very good things about. So that's on my reading list for 2026.
I've got that on my audiobook list. I downloaded it ages ago. Yeah. Not read it yet, or not listened to it yet. So, looking forward to that.
Yeah, definitely want to read. How are you, Jane?
I'm all right, a bit knackered. Work in the real job is killing me, but apart from that, I'm all right. I'm looking forward to my future trips to Norway at Easter. I'm busy preparing for my lecture at the International Bomber Command Centre on the 5th of March about gardening ops. That's one of their supper time lecture things. So really looking forward to that. I've got a couple of talks just for local libraries and things coming up as well in February. About sort of my social history work, not my military history stuff, because I do other stuff as well. So busy time, to be honest, very, very busy time. So I'm in desperate need of a holiday, even though I've just had one. So there you go. Right, so we're now going to be stepping back from individual raids or aircraft in this particular episode and looking instead at something more fundamental, how bombing actually works. And why hitting a target from the air in the 1940s was so extraordinarily difficult. To help us do that, we're joined today by Matt Doncaster, a former RAF pilot who brings a modern aviator's understanding of bombing physics, tactics and accuracy to the historical problems faced by Bomber Command and the US 8th Air Force. Matt, welcome to Never Mind the Dambusters. It's absolutely wonderful to have you with us.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you, James. And hello, everybody, your audience. It's an absolute pleasure to be joining you tonight. Yeah, thank you.
Now, before we get into the mechanics of bombing, could you tell us a little bit about your background, your route into the RAF, your flying career on the Harrier, and how that experience shapes the way you think about air power and weapons delivery?
Yeah, absolutely. My career, which spanned some 27 years in the Air Force, started when I was 14, to be honest, when I went to school in York, and we had a combined cadet force, and I came home having been pitched the Navy, the Army, and the Air Force section. And I went home and said to my mum, I want to join the Army section. They dress up in camouflage and fire guns and stuff. And, what 14-year-old boy doesn't really want to do that? And she went, no, you're not doing that. That sounds awful, very dangerous. The Navy section was being demobbed because there was complete lack of interest. So by default, I fell into the Air Force section. And little did she know that we at times dressed up in camouflage and fired guns and actually went flying, which is eminently more dangerous, I would suggest, in some regards. So it was through the CCF at school in York, and I just got bitten by the bug. The first time I flew anything actually. It was a chipmunk out of RAF Abingdon, way back. It must have been about 1984 maybe, and just went, wow, what a great way of looking down on the world, and I've been looking down on people ever since. But it stems from there, really. I got sponsored through school, and really, the Air Force door was open for me once I left university. Not that I stayed at university for very long. I only did a year, but I flew on the University Air Squadron. I'd had a flying scholarship as well at schools. I'd done a little bit of flying, then I did a little bit on the UAS, the Air Squadron, which meant, well, it sort of meant to me, I felt I can fly, and I can fly in a military environment, and I enjoyed it. So joined the Air Force in 1991 through officer training, flying training, got my wings in 94, and then started, the proper jobs. Albeit my first, anybody listening to this will clearly say that my first job wasn't a proper job. I went straight into instructing. I got my wings and went straight back into being a Tucano instructor. So did that for 3 years and then went to the front line. So there are a few of us who did that. It was a path open to a small percentage of people. But yeah, I taught in the system as a Tucano instructor. Then I went back into the system. They reassessed me as to which fast jet I was going to go and fly. And they posted me to the Harrier. So I was over the moon, to be honest. Somewhat daunting. You pitch up at RAF Wittering back in those days, to see a Harrier parked at the gate, and you go, crikey, this is suddenly very, very real. I'd had a great time instructing in Yorkshire, but to be suddenly, okay, this is frontline stuff. That was the serious business now. So I went through Wittering and then got posted to 3 Squadron. They were in Germany at the time, RAF Larbruck. Spent a year there before the squadron moved back to RAF Cottesmore. And saw my time out on the Harrier there, and then went back into instructing again, but this time on the Hawk. So I went into having done a frontline tour in a bomber. My Harrier mates will scold me for calling it a bomber because on our patch it said V-Stol fighter, but there's a lot of fighter bomber banter out there. But fundamentally, having been a mud mover and having done a tour on it, doing the tactics and doing the proper operational stuff, they sent me to RAF Valley on the Hawk, but on the weaponeering side of things. So this is the kind of the last step before a student goes to the front line. So I'm now instructing at at advanced level. I'm doing all the weaponeering as well as air combat and air defence work as well. During my 4 years, it was actually at Valley, but then I succumbed to a neck injury in 2003. It was actually 2003. Backseat of a Hawk. Very, very long, boring story, but it sent me to aircraft that can't pull as much G. So my G limit was capped at 3G, and I ended up going multi-engine. So I flew the C-17, 99 Squadron, and at a time when it was just Afghanistan and Iraq, that's all we did. So we were flying east, get airborne out of Bryce, go south, then go east, and you're off to the Middle East. And that's what I did for 3 years, by which time my neck injury got better. So I revisited my G limit, and they allowed me to increase it from a nominal 3G, which is what I was only allowed to pull at that point, to back up to no limit, effectively, so 789G. My career, whilst it had gone from fast jets to multi-engines, my career could go back to fast jets, albeit I was, at that point, about to leave. This is 2008, so I was going to leave in 2009 and try and get an airline job. They say you live in a bubble in the military. I had no idea that there was some financial crisis hitting the world in 2008-9. Absolutely oblivious. So, there, but for the grace, go I. And I stayed in, not because of that, but of other reasons. And because I could fly jets again. The system looked at me and they said, crikey, well, you've instructed it on Tucano, Hawk, you've done fast jets and multi-engine, both, operationally. We need an instructor at test pilot school at Boscombe Down. And you're it, because the present incumbent was off to Brunei on exchange for the Sultan's Air Force. So he was leaving and I was at Boscombe Down. I just happened to be at Boscombe Down, and the phone went and, they said, right, we've got this job for you. So I ended up on ETPS, Empire Test Pilot School. I'm not a test pilot, and I tell everybody this. They go, oh, you've done ETPS. I said, no, I haven't done ETPS. I instructed there. But I was the standards guy. So effectively just monitoring flying standards. But my core aircraft, I was flying Tucano, Hawk, Alpha Jet, Andover, last Air Force pilot to convert to the Andover before she went out of service. And then we replaced the Andover temporarily with the King Air. So I was responsible for bringing the King Air into service for its little sort of stopgap period down at Boscombe. In the round, flew absolutely everything that was involved, not only with the school, but with testing in the round anyways. That was kind of my job, in a nutshell for the 5 years I was at test pilot school. And I did a short ground tour to finish off my career in, it's basically, it's called the Air Support Operations Centre. So the ASOC is a call centre whereby guys on the ground will call and say, right, we need some air support and we need it now. And I did that for just over 2 years. And then I decided to take my transferable skills to the airlines at last. So that was it. That was me. And in 2017, I left and joined one of the major airlines in the world. And I'm contractually obliged not to mention which one it is, but you've only got to Google me and I think you'll find it. But it's one of the nuances of rules and regulations when talking in public. Weird, but there we go. So yeah, that's me really. Yeah, that was my career.
Yeah. I'm not allowed to say who I work for either, even though it's completely unexciting. Believe it or not. James will find that very strange. Who knows? Yeah. But I'm not
the rules are bizarre, aren't they?
Yeah.
The rules really are bizarre. Yeah.
I can say I'm a civil servant.
But no,
so, yeah.
But you asked me about bombing and the Harrier. Well, my time on the Harrier, is... I have a huge fondness for the jet. The jet was absolutely amazing. It was spawned, the one I flew, the GR7, was spawned from the American intervention and their interest in developing the Harrier 2. So the AV-8B, as they call it, Harrier 2 in the round. So I was flying effectively a flying computer, to be honest. Very computerized. The jet knew exactly where it was in height and space over the ground. It knew where the target was. It knew what time it was, and all these factors, which I'm going to talk about in a sort of 1940s setting in a minute. It was all done for me, to be honest. As long as I got the jet to over the target, the weapons release could be automatic. All the complicated bombing equations, which again I'm going to cover, were all done for me. So, but that notwithstanding the fact that it was doing it all for me, we as pilots, we as bomber pilots, we still had to understand the theory behind it, because computers don't always work in the way they're supposed to, and the Harrier was no different. You'd get reversionary modes, so you could go full automatic. You just literally just hold the button, fly over the target. The bomb would come off on its own when the jet decided. So you'd committed the attack as opposed to actually executed it per se by and 3, 2, 1 now, hit the pickle button kind of idea. And it would degrade back to an iron sight. It fundamentally what we had in the Hawk, just a gyro-stabilized iron sight, which is very, very akin to what was in bombers back in the 40s, to be honest. Just an optical sight of some description in a Hawk or a Harrier. It was out the front through either a gun sight in the Hawk or the head-up display in a Harrier. But when you're talking about much, much higher deliveries and stuff, the bomb sights in the 40s were literally, they're just optical pieces of equipment, aren't they? Bolted to the front of the airplane. The bombardier is looking down through it. He's dialing in various settings. Again, I'm going to cover all this in a minute. He dialed in those settings, and then he's got a crosshair. He's looking down through this optical tube, and there's a crosshair. And when it runs over the target, you press the button. And so a lot of what we did and were taught as pilots going through training, yes, it was a long time ago, 30 years ago. The fundamentals haven't changed at all. And even Typhoon, the Typhoon guys, when they rock up at Coningsby and get taught, how their ground attack Typhoon works, they'll have gone through the basics already, going through training, but then they'll be told, well, this is how the Typhoon does it. And by the way, if this goes wrong, you can still, get bombs on targets. So the theory is still very much sort of ingrained in you as a student pilot going through any sort of military training, really, if that's going to be your job, weapons delivery. So it gives me a very privileged insight, to be honest, into the difficulties and problems faced. When I read books, at the moment I'm reading Masters of the Air. It's the first time everybody's seen the series, right? But I'm actually reading the book, and I'm, the problems they faced trying to get bombs on target, it's absolutely no different, other than you've got technology on your side in this day and age. We take the technology away and it's just a dumb bomb. The problems are still the same. So it really has given me a privileged insight. And I spoke at the We Have Ways Festival couple of years ago on this exact subject, just to try and bring my insight and my experience and my knowledge, for what it's worth, to the public domain, to say, right, when you read a book and somebody's talking about the bomb run,
Yeah.
it's not a simple procedure. It's a major piece of science and physics and everything else going on, let alone the fact that people are shooting at you.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think that segues perfectly into the next question, because you mentioned the fundamentals, the fundamental challenge being the same for the RAF Bomber Command and US 8th Air Force in the Second World War. I just wonder if you could explain a little bit more about the core principles of medium and high altitude bombing and why hitting a target from several miles up was such a complex problem.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll start then, with the basics. So what we're going to do now through language and no visual aids is I'm going to try my level best to draw you a picture in your mind's eye of what we call the bombing triangle. So the bombing triangle. Okay. Imagine a right angle triangle whereby the base of the triangle is the ground. The 90-degree bit, so the vertical, highly technical bits of terminology going on here, but so the horizontal is the ground. Then the 90 degrees, the vertical, takes you to where the bomber's sat. The bomber is sat at the top of the vertical side of the triangle. And then you've got, obviously, the third side of the triangle, which is joining the bomber and the target. Okay, so that triangle is a function of altitude. So the vertical is the altitude. The horizontal is what we call the forward throw of the weapon. Come to that in a second. And between the bomber and the target, which is somewhere on that ground line, the bomb will fly. Now, the way the bomb flies, bombs and anything you drop, whether it be a dart or a 1,000-pound bomb, it falls in a certain way, defined by its speed at release, angle at release, the shape of it. What else? Air density, that has a factor. And the biggie, the absolute biggie, is the wind. And again, we'll come on to sort of the wind as being the major problem in a second. But this bomber that we've got perched on top of our triangle is moving through the air, clearly, at, let's call it 300 miles an hour. For the bomber's doing 300 miles an hour, the bomb is doing 300 miles an hour. And it's the fact that at release, it is still traveling over the ground at 300 miles an hour that generates what's called the forward throw. So it will travel from the release point over the ground a set distance. Now, that set distance, that forward throw, is defined by how high you release it, what speed you release it at, and the ballistics, in other words, the way that particular bomb flies. So a 540-pounder will fly differently to a 1,000-pounder. A German 1,000-pounder would have flown differently to a British 1,000-pounder because they're different shapes. They have different centers of gravity. They have different tails. But all these different nuances between the weapons are all defined mathematically. And boffins, when they're doing very, very high-level maths, go, we reckon if you drop this weapon from this height at this speed, it will travel over the ground this distance. Still air conditions, okay? Still air. So they just go, oh, there's no other factors other than speed and height. And you get these tables, these ballistic tables, whereby at 20,000 feet at 300 miles an hour, it will go, I don't know what it is. It could, but it's some distance. So it could be 2, maybe 3 miles ahead of the bomber is where it actually hits on the ground. So there's our triangle. So whilst we have a sort of a curved flight plan or flight path of bomb, we don't go there. We don't go with the curve. We just go, do you know what? It's going to go from the bomber and it's going to hit the target. So it becomes a straight line. So we've got 3 lines of a triangle. That's the bombing triangle. Now, how are you going to know when you're in the right place to press the button such that that bomb at that speed and at that height, and we're talking still wind, we'll come on to wind, but still wind, how do I know when to release it such that the forward throw takes it to the target? And this is where the sight comes in. So the sight, this optical piece of equipment that's strapped to the aeroplane, does a couple of things. Fundamentally, it looks forward. So it's looking, imagine back to the triangle, that bomber to target line is exactly where the bomb sight is looking down. Because as soon as the crosshair, which is forward of the aeroplane, it's looking forward at a piece of ground 2, maybe 3 miles ahead of the airplane. When that goes over the target and you press the button, you're not over it. You're at the back end of this triangle. Yeah. So the bomb will go and it will fly effectively down that line that you're looking down at the point of release. Hopefully that makes sense, because that's it, But how do you then design a site? And I'm not going to go into sort of Norden versus, Mark 14 bomb sites or anything like that, because I must admit, I was reading Masters of the Air and they were clearly raving about the Norden bomb site.
Yeah.
And for good reason, because there's a lot there's a lot going on with it. It's also American. They threw an awful lot of money at it.
Yeah.
But it's a tube. It's an optical tube with a crosshair in it, into which you can dial an angle. So going back to the triangle, basically the angle you want is the angle between the horizontal and that bomb fall line. Yeah, and that's called the depression. So that again is defined. So you dial that into the site. Your optical tube is looking down but forward of the aeroplane in doing so, at a set angle for your set parameters that you're trying to fly at. So that's the sort of basic maths of it, really. But that bombing triangle is affected by a number of factors, and this is where it gets quite interesting. So I was talking about how a bomb falls. Well, as soon as it's released, this is a dumb bomb. Dumb bomb means it's unguided. Once it's left the airplane, it's doing its own thing. You have no influence over it whatsoever. And of course, everything used in World War II, apart from rocketry, but that's subtly different. But the ballistics are kind of similar. It's just the rocket flies in a certain way and it's going faster. But let's get back to bombs. Free fall bombs. They're not guided. They're not controlled. They're not precision guided munitions like we have today. They literally once you've dropped them, that's it. Right, we're flying for us now. Off we go, Memphis Belle. Yeah, exactly. And you'd be turning off the bomb run, and the bombs are still in the air because you have no influence and you don't need to be there anymore. So, but it falls in this set way. But I talked about still air. As soon as you loose the bomb off the bottom of the bomber, it's in air that is doing something. The wind profile between the ground and the air, where the bomber is, it's 1,000 feet, you have no idea what the wind is doing. And the wind, atmospherics and weather and everything else, even on a summer's day, the wind at ground level is vastly different to the wind at 20,000 feet and everywhere in between. So we can today forecast it to quite an accurate, a high degree of accuracy. But back then you couldn't, that's for sure. So the navigator knew what the wind was, where the bomber was, because all his navigation is done through knowing or reverse engineering, actually, what the wind is doing. He might have a wind forecast and he's got something to go on, but all the way in and down the 4 hours or whatever it is to the target, he's refining the position through very, very basic but quite high level maths as a navigator. And he's working out, is the wind coming from the left? Is it coming from the right? Is there a headwind component? Is there a tailwind component? Because if you've got a tailwind component, your speed over the ground increases. If you've got a headwind component, your speed over the ground decreases for a given airspeed. Likewise, if the wind is from the right, you will get blown downwind. Instead of tracking from A to B, you're tracking A to left of B, if that makes sense, with a wind from the right, unless you correct for it.
Yeah.
So all of these corrections for the wind that's affecting the bomber are being told to the pilot. He's being told to steer this, skipper, steer left, steer right, come right 2 degrees, skipper, all that sort of, jargon. That's the navigator telling him to come right. I need you a little bit more into wind, because we're getting blown downwind. So that's the only way you're going to get the bomber to anywhere near the target area. So think about now dropping the bomb out the bottom. Well, you know what the wind is at the aeroplane because the navigator's worked it out, but you don't know from second of release to when it hits the ground. You don't know what the wind is. So you can have a wind from the left, let's say, at release, and on the ground, the wind could actually be coming from the right. So the bomb will naturally go with the wind. So let's say we release it with a wind from the left. The bomb immediately starts going, it will go to the right of the target. It goes downwind. Wind from the left, it goes downwind. It will hit right of the target. but it might hit a wind from the right halfway down, and then it'll start getting blown in. But you simply don't know. So this is fundamentally where all the major bombing errors come from. It's not about speed control. The formation is flying off the lead bomber. So, he's flying his 300 miles an hour. Everybody is flying formation. If you fly 302 miles an hour, you overtake the guy in front of you. It's as simple as that. So everybody's doing the right speed based off the master bomber, if you like. Everybody's at the right height, give or take. Obviously there's stacking in the formation, so there's a bit of an error in there. But it's the wind profile that is the complete unknown between release and the ground. And this is why, even with a northern bomb site where you've dialed in what you think the wind is, so you'll put a crosswind correction in, and you can also put a headwind and a tailwind component correction in, because let's go back to our still wind model, still air model. You've got the crosshairs going over the target. If you've got a headwind, as I said before, the headwind means that the forward throw of the weapon is decreased because it's only got a certain amount of energy. It can't go into the wind any more than it's got the energy for. So it will go short of the target. If you've got a wind from the left, it will go right and short of the target if you do nothing about it. So all that the bomb site does is says, right, there's a wind from the left. Right, let's make a correction. Let's step into wind, and the bomber actually will step into wind, but there will be a crosswind dialed into the site as well. And likewise, if the navigator says, you know what, we've got 20 knots on the nose here, then that's going to make the bomb go short. So do you know what? Actually, what you do is you decrease your depression, that angle we talked about, where the sight is looking.
Yeah.
You put it further forward. In other words, you release the weapon, at an adjusted position for that headwind or tailwind component. So that's all the sight does, but it's all fed by the navigator. The navigator says, right, this is the wind. Bombardier does his business with the sight, and then just stares at the crosshairs and just hopes that the bomber's on track and the crosshairs go through the target or somewhere close to the target. Wide field of view down these bomb sites for good reason. You're not looking down a straw. You're definitely looking down, quite a wide field of view. But if you are looking down a straw, you've got no chance of seeing the target area. And going back to inaccuracies, this is why both Bomber Command and the 8th, you can't put a quote bomb in a pickle barrel. It's an absolute impossibility. But this is how it was sold. It was as much about it as I do, in so much as this accuracy, this perceived accuracy from medium and heavy bombers was sold as the panacea. This is going to solve the war. We're going to bomb with such accuracy that nothing is going to be able to survive, And by the way, the collateral damage and everything else is going to be reduced. Well, in reality, no, absolutely not. It's we all know about the accuracy figures, and very quickly, that sold level of accuracy was very much a case of, well, do you know what? We're just going to area bomb here because guess what? Everybody's a target now. Do you know what? That's it. You can't bomb a particular building of a factory complex from 20,000 feet with a dumb bomb today, let alone back then.
Yeah.
Because of
physics
these
don't
inherent
change,
inaccuracies.
Yeah, exactly.
So, no, exactly. Physics do not change. I was, going back to Masters of the Air, I read with interest how the 8th went against the U-boat PEMs, actually. I know you don't want to talk specific raids and stuff, but, they're coming down because of the weather. And funny old thing, you bomb at a lower altitude, your accuracy will go up. 2 reasons. A, flight of time of the weapon is less. So that's, actually, fundamentally 1 reason. Time of flight of the weapon is reduced, therefore it's less affected by this unknown wind quantity. So if you bomb from 20,000 feet, same day, 10,000 feet, you will be more accurate at 10,000 feet than you are at 20,000 feet, simply because your bomb is not as affected over time by this unknown wind. You take it to 5,000 feet, 2,000 feet, 1,000 feet, 500 feet in a Mosquito, you're going to hit every time because you know what the wind is. The wind at 500 feet is, guess what? Pretty much the same wind as it is on the ground. There's no variance. Time of flight of the weapon is measured in seconds as opposed to nearly minutes. So your accuracy goes up. So the lower you can come down, the more accuracy you're going to get with a dumb bomb. And then you can also put things like dive angle in there as well. Now, you're not going to dive a bomber stream. No way, Jose, are you going to say, right, follow me, chaps, and then enter a 40-degree dive with 400 B-17s behind you?
Mhm.
Even though your accuracy will go up, I think your fear factor alone will go through the roof, let alone the fact that you're surrounded by flak as well. Let's talk about the smaller, the more agile bombers, things like your Mosquito or your Typhoon or your Hurry Bomber.
Mhm.
You can do things like 10, 20, 30-degree dives into the target. And actually, that helps you not only from an accuracy perspective, but also you can see that you actually see the target. Because, of course, the lower you go, you haven't got a sight through the floor in a Typhoon. You haven't got a sight through the floor in a Hurricane. You're looking out the front. So you will naturally tend to dive into the target area, acquire it, but that's low level tactics, and that's a completely different kind of ball game to medium and high level stuff where you are bombing level, but you've got the luxury there of being able to see through the floor of the airplane because they've designed it such that it's going to be a heavy bomber. It's not going to be hoovering around at 500 feet. It's going to be up in the 10s, 15, 20,000 feet bracket. So it's there by design. So horses for courses, without a doubt. But that's fundamentally bombing triangle and how it's affected by wind. And yeah, it's an absolute swine of a thing, the wind. The bigger bombs, if we want to talk about things like, the tall boy family, they would release them at sort of similar heights. But what you've got there is a 22,000-pound bomb, free falling and hitting the ground at supersonic speed. I mean, it was going some. And we're talking about speed and how wind affects. The slower you fly, anything, aeroplane, bomb, bullet, whatever, slower it's going, the more affected it is by the wind. So the faster you go, the less you are affected by the wind, by crosswind, certainly. The amount of angle you need to put in, or track correction, if you like, or into wind, because of this crosswind from right or left effect, the faster you go, the less you have to do it. Exactly the same for these big bombs. As soon as they go, they are accelerating so much faster than anything else. A 1,000-pounder, a 22,500 or whatever it is, 1,000-pound, tall boy is off to the races really, really quickly. So its time of flight is markedly reduced. We were talking about time of flight earlier. If you can reduce your time of flight, your inherent inaccuracies caused by this unknown wind profile are reduced. And so if your bomb is going nice supersonic speed at impact, it's going to be less affected by that wind. Hence, you can hit the turpits from quite high up. Okay, they threw a lot at it. Let's be honest. It wasn't just one, but they got it. So somebody got it right. So yeah. So the bigger the bomb, the better. The lower you can bomb, the better. And yeah, I mean, if as meteorology, I suppose, got better during the war, which it inherently did, it's you get more of a sense of what the wind might be between the top of the triangle and the target. But it's still your biggest unknown, without a shadow of a doubt. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about this in the context of Bomber Command's mine-laying operations, air raid mines at sea. And it sort of explains a lot of reasoning behind why they were conducting these operations at such low levels in the very early stages of the mine-laying campaign, because it was all about accuracy. You can't just go and chuck your mines in the sort of general vicinity. They've got to be laid to very, very specific coordinates within shipping lanes at certain tide times, etc., for them to be effective. And what you've described sort of fits in with all of that perfectly, really.
Yeah, I've not read into mine laying per se. Obviously, I know it happened from the air. I mean, if you can't get a mine layer in, well, drop them from the aeroplane. But no, you're absolutely right. You've hit the nail on the head there, Jane, because you're absolutely right. If you're Royal Navy that is following you up through those shipping lanes and those minefields, if you haven't got them in the right place, well, you're putting them in mortal danger. So absolutely, accuracy is not only for hitting a tactical or even a strategic target. It's for, as you say, mine laying as well. All manner of reasons why you want accuracy. And the other thing as well is, of course, you don't want to go and do this twice. Exactly. If you can get it done, once, brilliant.
Yeah.
Move on to the next target set. If you've got to come back and do it again, you're not going to be very popular very quickly as a planner. If you say, "Oh, God, it's Bremen again," really, we were there like a week ago.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So now everybody was obviously striving for accuracy, but it was immensely difficult from high altitude. And to be honest, even by the end of the war, there was no real increase in accuracy per se. It was still an area bombing campaign. Bomber Harris gets a bad rap. He had no choice. To be brutally frank, he had absolutely no choice, let alone, of course, Bomber Commander bombing at night. Oh, let's put another factor in there. So not only can you not see the target, you're bombing at night as well. Yeah, I mean, it's just, it must have been just hellishly difficult and quite frustrating, I would imagine. I mean, the specialist raids notwithstanding, I mean, the Dambusters clearly stands out above all. The sinking of the Tirpitz, getting a tall boy through a U-boat pen, all fantastic PR photographs, taken the next day by photo reconnaissance and then plastered all over the newspapers. I mean, fantastic public relations at a time when it wasn't necessarily going that, particularly well for the Allies. But, that was a very, very small percentage of the overall bombing campaign. Those specialist weapons, really were for one-off jobs, to be honest. The bouncing bomb wasn't used again after that, to my knowledge, because there was no need. The dams were, I'm sure and your audience knows, it was a nut that needed to be cracked. And it was, but huge amounts of effort, expertise, thinking outside the box to get those lengths over dams to drop bombs that bounce. What the heck are you doing? Such a small percentage, 99 point something or other % of Bomber Command and 8th Air Force missions were just going against strategic industrial, and by that I mean, the industrial centers, things that are making fuel, oils, ball bearings, all that good stuff that I'm sure you've talked about in other episodes. The strategic side of a bombing campaign is stuff that is supporting the front line, and by definition is a long way back from the front line as well. So the strategic bombing campaigns, they're area campaigns pretty much from the get-go, just because of inaccuracies. That's it. When I hear people talk about, and they berate Bomber Harris, and he was, he had this bloodlust for German towns and city centres and all this sort of stuff. You just go, hang on a minute. He is trying to hit a factory which has been strategically, funny odd thing, placed where the workforce lives in the middle of a city somewhere. Where you just go, well, no choice really,
Yeah.
I'm sure they would have loved, I'm sure the planners would have loved it. I'm sure the aircrews would have loved it. And I'm sure, and clearly, the civilian population probably would have loved the fact that if somebody had invented a bomb that could be placed in a pickle barrel, guess what? It would be a whole different ballgame, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But the simple truth is, you can't do it.
I guess you don't really even get that until such time as you've got some laser-guided weapons sort of, 40, 50 years later, perhaps.
Exactly. It really was. It was sort of the Vietnam era, really. If you want me to digress slightly, I can, but it's the Vietnam era with things like pave tack. So this is laser-guided munitions. So you basically put a laser receiver on the front of the bomb. There's some electronics in there as well. So not only can the bomb see a laser spot on the target, which is put there by a targeting pod, and that could be your own, or it could be from somewhere else, or it could be somebody on the ground as well, pointing a laser at the target. It reflects that laser energy. The bomb can see that. It comes off the wing and it just literally flies because it's got a little battery in it and it's got little winglets at the back which control the bomb up, down, left, right. And the bomb flies down that reflected laser energy and hits the target. Now, you can imagine getting that to work is quite difficult. Early days, accuracy was not that great. Now, you are talking, it literally just hits the spot every time. Then you couple that with GPS as well, ground positioning system. So satellite navigation, we take it for granted. It's in everybody's phone and we really absolutely take it for granted, do we not? Well, you put that miniaturized GPS technology on the bomb as well, you've got a level of redundancy there as well. So you can actually, you don't need a laser now. You can tell the bomb where the target is within classified a few feet, and it will go there. And as long as you release it in the right place with enough energy, it will simply fly itself from where it knew it was at release, because it's got a GPS, to where the target is, because guess what? We know where it is,
Yeah.
and it's as simple as that. So again, the differences are, beyond 180 degrees out. I mean, we are talking such extreme differences between a 1,000-pound bomb coming out of a B-17 or a Lancaster or whatever to a very small now. If you look at photographs of even jets who were flying around Afghanistan and in more recent times, sort of Syria, places like that, if you see any footage out of Ukraine, there's very little actual air footage out of Ukraine. But, the bombs on the wings are very small these days because they don't need to be huge because your accuracy's gone up. So something with a net explosive mass of considerably less than 1,000-pounder, can do significant damage because it's arriving and it's hitting with pretty much pinpoint accuracy. So you can carry more of them, of course. So, all these sort of, multiplication factors come into it as well. B-17, I read, didn't carry that many bombs.
No.
Quite a big aeroplane. It didn't carry many. The Lanc obviously carried more, but you're not talking about huge amounts of weaponry coming out of, a bomber. So 4 bombs, let's say, 4,000-pounders coming out of a B-17 or something like that, if one got close, you'd be lucky. Hence, you've got to fly with 400 aircraft to try and get a net density on the target in order to cause it enough damage to achieve what the planners want you to do. So again, you've got to look at, why did they throw that many bombers? Well, actually, because they needed to, because your percentage accuracy is so low. You've got to sort of artificially build it back up again by throwing lots of bombs from lots of bombers, et cetera, et cetera. With it comes an advantage, clearly, of the cross cover and everything else. I wouldn't want to go anywhere near a B-17 in my right mind in a Fokker-Wulf or an ME-109. I mean, good Lord. 150 cal's bad enough, let alone 13 or something. It's, but, that said, it wasn't the panacea. Clearly, we lost a lot of them, and we lost a lot of bomber command as well, clearly, because, they are, you're still talking about being vulnerable, flying at 20,000 feet. So, it's all part of that very complicated equation.
Absolutely loving this conversation. It is absolutely a nerd like me's paradise. It really is. It could not be further up my street. Yeah. I'm sure our listeners will absolutely love it as well. James, is there anything else that you want to ask? I think we've just about covered all the questions on our list, really. Anything else that you wanted to raise?
I don't think so. No, it's absolutely fascinating. And I mean, I did notice you, Matt, just starting to do some hand movements that obviously the listeners don't see, but
it's inevitable. That's just inevitable.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. If you did that in the bar, you get fined a pint.
Oh, really?
It's a really hard habit to break. Hands in the bar. Oh, that's it. We're buying everybody a drink. But it's difficult not to cross my arms now.
I'm terrible for it.
Yeah. But, I mean, I can, if you want, I can sort of briefly go back to sort of dive bombing, if you like, and just paint a picture for people using extremes. So let's have two examples. You've got an aircraft flying horizontally, so at low altitude. So he's not at 20,000 feet. Let's say he's at 5,000 feet, something like that. Okay, but he's flying level. We've talked about inherently from a level release of a bomb, his accuracy is going to be increased against somebody at 10, 15, 20 because he's lower. Flight time of the weapon is less. Wind effect is going to be, it's slightly more predictable in so much as it's probably not going to change as much in that 5,000 feet, but he's still going to be subject to errors. Now, let's take to an extreme, and we have now he's coming down on the target in a 90-degree dive. He is pointing vertically down at the target. So he's got his crosshairs on the target, and he goes, boop, and like a Stuka, releases the bomb. Now, your listeners are probably going to go, well, hang on a minute, that bomb's still going to go from point A to point B. Well, it is, but now we're not. There's next to no forward throw of the weapon. If you imagine, we're throwing it forward from the level release, from the vertical release.
Triangle.
It's literally just it's coming off. Yeah, well, there is no triangle. Fundamentally, you're flying. You're flying down that side of the triangle. So there's no forward throw, and also, of course, as you dive towards the ground, you're imparting a vertical velocity on the bomb as well. So it's already setting off from the airplane in whatever dive speed you've got. So you could be diving at, I don't know what, Stukas were pretty slow to be honest, but a let's say you were coming down at, well, again, let's just go for 300 miles an hour, let's say, right, at release. Well, you've already imparted 300 miles an hour on the bomb. The bomb is falling to Earth already at 300. And then you let it go. And of course, gravity will assist as well. So again, you're reducing the flight time of the weapon. So reduction in flight time of the weapon, as well as no forward throw, is going to minimize those errors. So anywhere in between horizontal and vertical is going to be a bonus. It doesn't get any better than vertical, to be honest.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get any worse than horizontal, if that makes sense. Yeah. From an errors perspective. So anywhere in between, even if it's 10 degrees nose down, 20 degrees, 30 degrees, your inherent accuracy, because you are now diving, is going to be increased towards that panacea of pure vertical. Guess what? My errors are absolutely to the minimum now. And that's how I try and explain dive bombing, because, we do high angle dive bombing in a Harrier up to 40 degrees from 20,000 feet. Yes, I had a computer there and it was doing all the computations, but it's still in the background, especially if it's a non-precision guided munition. So a dumb bomb, 40 degrees in a Harrier, whether there's a computer attached to it or not, is going to be inherently more accurate than me trying to do it level. Or from 10 degrees. Yeah. So we would fly these profiles for certain weapons and certain delivery profiles, especially if you want to release the weapon higher. So we were talking about the fact that I couldn't see through the floor of a Harrier. No, I had to look out the front. Well, guess what? If I'm coming down the hill at 40 degrees, I am looking out the front at the target area. So yeah, that's how I try and sort of get the concept of dive bombing across to people. Even shallow dives are going to aid your accuracy. It's not going to be, Delta Hotel direct hit every single time. No, it isn't. But your CEP, here's another acronym coming at you. So CEP is circular area probability. Yeah. So this is where 50% of your bombs go. So if you've got a CEP of 100 foot and you're throwing 1,000 pounders into the equation, quid's in, because 100 foot from 1,000 pounder, you're going to know about that. That's going to chafe. So, but a CEP of 2,000 feet, for 1,000 pounder, actually 1,000 pounder can go off 2,000 feet away, and I'm going to hear it. But if I'm behind some sandbags or something like that, or in a slit trench, it's, I'm going to get a bit of blast, and I'm going to get, that was close. But I'm going to get up, dust myself off, and carry on the fight, kind of idea. So if your CEP is huge, vice the weapon you're throwing, it's called KP. The probability of kill. KP is a number. 1 means, guess what? Guaranteed. 0 is you might as well not go, need to go airborne, kind of idea. So your KP, as we call it, probability of kill, is also coupled to your CEP for a given weapon. So, as I say, if you can get your CEP down into, let's say, the hundreds of feet for a big bomb, you're onto a winner already. And diving will reduce your CEP. So yeah, that's kind of how I explain it. But you just use it two extremes, horizontal, vertical, anywhere in between is a bonus. So away you go. And when you see all that lovely footage from the Imperial War Museum of anti-shipping, again, that's hitting a ship is notoriously difficult because they're so small.
Incredibly hard.
They look really, really big in port. My goodness, they're not from the air. I can guarantee you. So if you've got a small target, again, you're trying to, we're not talking strategic target now, talking tactical targets. So whether that be an armored convoy or tanks in the open or a ship or something relatively small, you want to try and get your accuracy up. But then we could talk about rocketeering, which is great fun, but it's not bombing. But we maybe talk about rocketing some of the time. But so that's how I talk about dive bombing and try and explain it to people.
Feel enlightened about you, James. I do. Yeah, I feel really enlightened after that.
I do. I mean, I was just thinking about school when we talked about triangles and angles and such like. If they'd have done it on bombing, I would have paid much more attention.
And me.
Exactly, yeah. Although I probably would have giggled at 13 years old discussing issues with wind.
Well, of course. You just had a classroom full of giggling school kids at the mere mention of wind. Yes, exactly. No, never.
But anyway, I think that's time to wrap up, Jane.
I think so, yeah. Oh, it's been brilliant.
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, the explanations, they really helped bridge this gap between historical experience and underline the physics of bombing, and you've made it so interesting, shedding light on the challenges faced by aircrews in the Second World War and afterwards and before. And it goes to say thank you to everybody who is listening. If you've enjoyed, never mind the Dambusters and listening today, please consider leaving us a rating or review. It really helps the podcast reach new listeners. You can also support the show for as little as £2.40 or $3 a month, with details in the show notes. Feel free as well to join the conversation in our Facebook group or follow us on social media. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And next week, we're going to be talking about Bomber Command raids on Rotterdam with Eric Parker. Very much looking forward to that one. So until next time, take care, everybody, and goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.